So our next body system is the excretory system. Um, what do you know about it? Excretory system, John? Makes you pee? Yeah. What's the purpose of peeing? Yeah, getting rid of waste from where? Where is this waste? It comes from the digestion of foods and the byproducts of our metabolism. And so this waste ends up in the blood eventually. And you're right. The urine is a way of getting rid of some of those waste products. So the term excretion means to get rid of waste. The waste from metabolism, the waste from all the chemical reactions taking place in an organism. And we have several organs whose function is to help do that. So one is the lungs, and we just talked about this, and that our lungs have sort of dual purpose, right? They take in oxygen to provide to our cells for cellular respiration, but also they get rid of carbon dioxide. They excrete CO2 as we exhale. As those, if you remember the picture of the lungs and the alveoli, they're surrounded by those capillaries, those blood vessels. And so carbon dioxide from our blood can diffuse into the alveoli, and when we exhale, we're exhaling that carbon dioxide. Sweat glands in our skin are also a form of an excretory organ. Okay, now sweat glands are to regulate our temperature. Obviously, we talked about that as we talked about homeostasis. But our sweat isn't just water. What's in sweat? Salt. There's a lot of salts, and those salts are waste products. Like if you play sports or something, and you like wear the same baseball cap, for example, at every game. After a while, you'll notice it gets like white, crusty stuff on the inside. Or if you're exercising for a long time, you go out for a long run, you might notice that on your skin you have like this white substance. Those are the salts, because the sweat coming out of your body, as the water part evaporates, the salts are left over. And that's why sweat burns when it gets in your eyes and so forth, because it has these salts mixed in with it. It also has urea, some of the same product that we urinate out. That's part of what we release when we sweat. Our sweat glands are partially an excretory organ. Our liver is an important excretory organ because it takes amino acids and proteins, and they have, if we remember back to when we talked about these types of molecules, they have nitrogen in them. And that nitrogen, if it builds up, can become a problem. And so our liver helps to strip away that nitrogen. It helps to break down red blood cells. It also helps to break down toxins, drugs, alcohol. Those things are metabolized in the liver and broken down to make them less toxic to the body. And you may also know that if a person has a problem with drinking or drugs, sometimes it takes a toll on the liver, because the liver is constantly having to break down alcohol in the blood. Eventually can lead to cirrhosis of the liver and damage to the liver where it doesn't function any longer. This is what the liver looks like. Probably one of the most important organs of our excretory system is the kidney. Okay? So our kidneys are, they're located kind of in our back, like on each side of our of our backbone, of our spine. Kidneys are towards the back of your body and like your abdomen. And they look like, I don't know, does this look like any food you've ever eaten? Yeah, kidney beans look just like kidneys. That's why they're called kidney beans. They're reddish in color. Okay, they have the shape of a bean. They're larger. And our kidneys are really important organs and how our body functions and how our body works. They take all the blood in our body gets shuttled to the kidneys. Okay, there's these major arteries from our heart which brings our blood to the kidneys, and the kidneys then can filter out things that are waste products. Okay, so they take that urea that comes from the breakdown of proteins and other materials, glucose and other substances are removed from our blood, mixed with water, and that's what urine is. Urine is a mixture of water along with all these waste products from our blood that are being disposed of. Okay? If we look at sort of the anatomy of the excretory system, of the urinary system, we have the two kidneys. We all have two kidneys, a left and a right one. Okay, blood is shuttled. Some goes to the right kidney, some goes to the left kidney. They take out toxins, waste products from the blood, mix it with water to produce urine. And that urine then sort of drips one drop at a time through these long tubes called the ureters. So the ureters are constantly receiving this drip of urine from each kidney, left and right kidney, and they lead to the urinary bladder. And the bladder is a storage organ. It's an organ that stores up this constant drip of urine, and the bladder fills up eventually with urine. It has connections to our nervous system that tells us our bladder is getting full and prompts the response, that the feeling that a person needs to urinate. When that does happen, when a person does urinate, there are also nerves which can open up these special muscles that allow the urine to leave the bladder. Okay? The tube that carries urine out of the body from the bladder is called the urethra. So ureters carry the urine from the kidneys to the bladder, and the urethra carries it out of the body. If we look at what's in urine, so obviously it depends on some different factors. What's in urine could depend on what's in a person's diet, can be determined by their hydration level. Most of urine is water. 95% or so of urine is just water. And if you have been drinking a lot of water, then urine is clearer, right? Because your kidneys can monitor your hydration level. If you're really hydrated, your kidneys will say, all right, let's put more into the urine. We have plenty of water. More. If you're dehydrated, okay, if you've been sweating a lot for exercise and you haven't been drinking a lot of water, your kidneys also know that. And they say, okay, we don't have enough water in our blood. We need to put less in the urine, hold on to more for the blood, and then urine becomes darker, more concentrated, because your kidneys are putting less water into it. And then the other stuff that makes up the urine, okay, urea is the main waste product that our kidneys get rid of, but also all these other things that you see listed here. Those are all parts of the urine. And, if you eat a lot of foods high in sodium, then your kidneys will remove more sodium. So kidneys are working to maintain homeostasis, to maintain balance. Now, there are situations when the kidneys are not working properly. Kidney disease, okay? And so obviously, if the kidneys aren't functioning properly, then the waste products from our blood are not going to be removed properly. And so urea, salts, all of these things can start to increase. The levels in our blood can increase, and they can start to become dangerous. And the term for that, when those waste products are increasing in concentration, is uremia. It means urine in the blood. And if those waste products build up, like the outward symptoms, a person might be confused, They might have seizures even. They can become tired and sort of groggy. At extreme levels, a person can go into a coma if the levels of these toxins build up in their blood. Um, and so, what are the things that can cause our kidneys not to work properly? Many different things. Low blood pressure. So, if a person has low blood pressure, they're not able to force fluid into their kidneys as well. If they have high blood pressure, that can actually damage the units of the kidney called the nephrons. Certain drugs, certain heavy metals like lead or mercury poisoning, they can damage the kidneys permanently. Sometimes infections can impair the kidneys. There's all sorts of things, damage. So if you are familiar with boxing at all, it's illegal in boxing to punch somebody in like the lower back. And that's because you could physically damage a person's kidneys. If there was some sort of accident where a person had trauma to their back, it could damage the kidneys physically. Sometimes people that are on high protein diets, the protein, because proteins have this nitrogen, as proteins are broken down in our body, they produce lots of these waste products that our kidneys have to get rid of. And so if a person is eating really high levels of protein, their kidneys have to work harder to get rid of all those products. And so they can be stressed, and long term that can damage the kidneys. Sometimes different minerals that are in urine can start to crystallize, and instead of just being released in urine, they can start to form what are called kidney stones. And kidney stones, this is a picture of what one looks like. That's a huge one. That would be, if a person had a kidney stone of that size, it would be agonizingly painful. If you ever have known someone that had kidney stones, it's very, very painful. They form, and then as they move through the ureter, which is a very narrow tube, or as they get into the bladder and move through the urethra. Basically, it's like a little stone that's making its way through the urinary system and is very, very painful. Sometimes when a person has kidney stones, they're in like excruciating pain. They sometimes can try and break them up with like sound waves. Other times a person might be told just drink lots of water to try to flush those kidney stones out of the excretory system. And until that happens, usually a person could be in a lot of pain. There's also disease called gout, which is the buildup of one of the waste products called uric acid. And it gets deposited in a person's joints in a crystallized form and causes joint pain. It was often called the rich man's disease or the king's disease because people that were eating a lot of meat and shellfish could cause the accumulation of these compounds and could have a higher likelihood of a person getting this disease called gout. So if you ever have known someone that had kidney failure, anyone know what's the treatment? So if your kidneys aren't working, so first of all, you can live without a kidney, a single kidney. Like what if you had let's say a person had damage to one kidney, it stopped working. The other kidney if it's healthy, can do all of the job of filtering the blood, and a person can live perfectly healthy life with a single kidney. But if both kidneys are not working, then that's a problem. JT? Yeah, so when a person's kidneys are failing for some reason, if they're not filtering the blood properly, if the levels of these toxins are building up, then a person may have to have what's called dialysis. Dialysis is basically a machine that artificially filters a person's blood. And so this is what a dialysis machine looks like. There's special offices, doctors' offices, that they only do kidney dialysis because kidney disease is fairly common. And so if your kidneys stop working, you may have to go to this doctor's office every day sometimes, maybe every few days. And basically, you have to be hooked up to this machine, which takes blood out of your body. Okay, you have typically, if you're going for dialysis, they put in like a permanent catheter or tube so they don't have to like insert an IV 3 times a week. They permanently put one in your body, in your arm or in your neck, so that they can just hook up to this every time you go for dialysis. And basically, your blood goes out of your body into this machine where special filters, dialysis tubing, which we've worked with, and fluids can basically filter out those toxins from your blood. And then the blood goes back into your body and it's been filtered. Dialysis doesn't do the job as well, really, as your own functioning kidney, but it can do well enough to keep you alive, to keep you healthy. But if both kidneys are not working at all, it's not a permanent solution, right? You could keep going for dialysis week after week, for the rest of your life. It's not a great option, but it is going to keep you alive and relatively healthy. So if you have no working kidneys, like what could you do to solve the problem? Jordan? Yeah, kidneys can be transplanted. So kidneys can be taken from one person and basically inserted into another person, reconnected to the arteries, and they can function perfectly. And so a kidney transplant is a solution to severe kidney disease. You can get a kidney from someone that has died. So, for example, someday when you get a driver's license, you might choose, like I chose to be an organ donor. And what that means is that if I die in some way and my organs can be used to be transplanted to someone else, then I've given permission that doctors can do that. So if my kidneys are still functioning, they can take both of them, give them to somebody that needs a kidney transplant. And then if that works properly, then that person will have a functioning kidney. Sometimes you could get them from another living person. Sometimes if a person's kidneys fail, other people in their family may donate one of their kidneys. So if I donated a kidney to somebody, I would still have a working one because I have 2 functioning kidneys. The person that got the organ transplant, they'd have a functioning kidney, and we could both live and be healthy. So sometimes people get kidney transplants from a living person. Usually when they do that, so what has to happen, this kind of gets to another body system we'll talk about. When a person gets an organ transplant, we could transport lots of organs, right? You could get a liver transplant. You could get a lung transplant. You can get eye transplants, kidney transplants. There's lots of organs that we can take from one person and give to someone else who's having some sort of medical issue. Do you know when a person receives a organ transplant, what do they have to do to allow that organ to function properly? Jason? Oh, so first off, yeah, good point. So because our body has these antigens, these identifiers that say, hey, this is part of your body, immune system, don't attack it. One thing is they want a close match. So they can test. That's why relatives are typically the best people to give a transplant to someone else because they have very similar antigens on their body, and your body is less likely to think it's a foreign invader. What's the other thing? Jordan, is that what you were going to say? There's something else. When you actually and before you get the transplant and after you get the transplant, you need to take special medications. And do you know what they do, Trinity? Yeah. What does that mean? What do you think they do?
It like tells your body not to get it.
Yeah, and it does that by lowering your immune system response. So basically, you take these drugs, they lower your immune response, so your immune system is weaker and doesn't attack this new organ that's being transplanted. And you have to typically stay on those drugs for the remainder of the time you have the transplant. So, what's the problem with that, Jordan?
Sometimes they fail and then your body rejects the organ.
Okay, yeah. So, if this doesn't work, if you're immune, sometimes a person gets a transplant and their even all of these measures don't work, their immune system attacks the new kidney, for example, and destroys it. Obviously, then they don't have a working kidney. Ash, what were you going to say? I was talking about if you have to take these medications, what's the difficulty in that? Yeah, because these drugs are limiting the functioning of your immune system, you're more vulnerable to infection, right? You may have heard about, for example, people with a lowered immune system, people that are more vulnerable to disease and pathogens. One of the reasons a person may have a lowered immune system is they're on these anti rejection drugs because they may have gotten a transplant in the past. Um, Also, sometimes infections, bacterial infections, can take hold in the excretory system. It's called a urinary tract infection. You might have heard of a UTI. Lots of times people abbreviate it. This is when bacteria get into the bladder or the ureter or the kidneys and cause an infection. And if untreated, it can cause permanent damage to the kidneys and so forth. Um, Urinary tract infections are more common in women than they are men because in women they have a shorter urethra than in males, and therefore it's easier for bacteria to actually get into the ureter and the bladder and the kidneys in women than it is in men. And then finally, the last excretory malfunction we can talk about is liver failure. So most of what we've been talking about is failure of the kidneys, but like we said, liver is also an excretory organ. Liver detoxifies lots of things from our blood. So sometimes infections can damage the liver. Hepatitis is a disease that can also damage the liver. Cancer can affect the liver. Alcohol and toxins exposure can affect the liver. And so, if that happens again, it's called cirrhosis of the liver, damage to the liver. And if a person's liver completely stops functioning, they can't really survive. They need a transplant. And if they don't get a transplant, eventually liver severe cirrhosis or malfunctioning of the liver can be fatal. All right. Any questions about anything excretory system related?